there. Before Lowe's, I worked at a company for about a year and a half called OnQ out in the San Francisco Bay Area. We built software for moving companies. We also had a pretty unique offering where we had a call center of agents that would handle all of the incoming leads for the moving companies that we partnered with. And then before that, out of Charleston, South Carolina, for 2 years, I worked on started a company focused on the food and beverage industry. What we were trying to do there was really help people get a better understanding of what life was really like at certain food and beverage restaurants, partner with those restaurants, get feedback, help them improve, working there, really help them improve how the relationship with their employees went, and then help people understand where they really wanted to work.
Cool.
Yeah, so my name is Clint Steckity. I grew up in Michigan and went to Michigan State for a bachelor's in carpet soil science. And then I headed down to Georgia and got my master's with Paul Rammer, who's on the line here, in turfgrass breeding and genetics, and then transitioned into Zingli Lee's lab, who's also on the call, on soybean breeding. So did that for PhD. And then as far as startup experience goes, I don't have as much as Sean does. In the company I started with is probably a little bit later stage than what Sean's was talking about too, in terms of we had already gone through some funding rounds and things like that. But I've been working for a company called Inari Agriculture for the past 2 years. I'm a plant research scientist there, leading our soybean breeding efforts.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Another thing I forgot to mention, attendees, is that if you want to, please post questions in the Q&A. At the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A button. You can post questions there. I will default to going off those questions, but otherwise I do have a list of questions for these guys. But if you want to post questions, feel free to post questions there and I will ask them. So I don't see any questions yet, but let me get started. So, okay, so, and this is for both of you guys. What motivated you to join a startup? Whoever wants it. Go.
I mean, it's a loaded question, but basically, there's a sense of having that sense of ownership in a startup, starting something from scratch. I mean, I started my own startup. I joined a startup. The motivation really there is to, basically have a lot more hands-on with much more. From my standpoint, it's in computer science, software engineering. So we're building digital products, and it's really having a sense of ownership across so much of the feature set of that product. Building something from scratch. When I started at Sugar City in Charleston, I really learned how to build something from scratch. The reason didn't really pan out. We couldn't really get that MVP to take place. We couldn't get enough people to really find the value in it. So the next decision I had was, okay, do I go into another startup, or do I, go into more of a corporate field or more of an established company? And I still really had a motivation to want to be involved in, the ground floor of a product, to wear a lot of different hats, to have a lot of ownership over, some of any of the decisions we're making. That's not just from a technology standpoint, from a product standpoint, from a business product standpoint as well. So that was the main, motivation when I joined OnQ was, there was definitely a product market fit that was established. I'd learned how to kind of create something from scratch. Now I wanted to learn and go how to grow something, say from 5 customers paying to 100, which is what we ended up doing before I ended up leaving. So that was the main motivation there to join, just more of that hands-on, which is ultimately what you get out of a startup. That's good and bad depending on who you are. There are you have to wear a lot of hats. There's going to be a lot of asks you that doesn't necessarily fall into your, you don't necessarily have a job description that you can refer back to and say, no, that's not really my responsibility. I have somebody else, because you're probably one of, depending on the size of the company, you could be one of 3, one of 10, one of 30. There's just not enough people to fall back on. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Clint?
Yeah, no, I'd echo a lot of the same things that Sean was talking about in terms of kind of what motivated me. I mean, I think this audience is mostly plant breeding folks, and I mean, as you know, for most plant breeding jobs, a lot of times what you'd be doing is taking over a program that was probably established by somebody else. Whether it be a pretty well-oiled machine, a big company, or taking over an academic breeder's position. So this was kind of a unique opportunity for me to at least kind of start something from scratch and start something new. Um, and I think too, it's allowed me to learn a lot about different aspects of kind of the seed business as well. Just in addition to what I would experience as a breeder, probably at a larger company. So learning about production and go-to-market strategies and supply chain and all these other different things that go into creating a product. So it's been kind of a nice experience to be able to kind of start something from scratch, which was part of the motivation. And then also, I think since I'm an early career person, having an opportunity to learn about other things outside of just what you think of as traditional plant breeding. So kind of getting exposed to other aspects of the business.
Cool. What do you guys love the most about being part of a startup versus Sean, you especially, you've done both. So what is your favorite thing about the startup experience?
I mean, it is that sense of ownership. That's part of it. That's really kind of what makes the startup, joining a startup unique for every person, is that sense of ownership. Some people like it. Some people, they don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to have to be that decision maker. So I liked building something up from the ground up. I liked, still building it to be able to be flexible enough that other people can get involved. But yeah, the main thing was just that sense of ownership. Every single day, decisions I was making was, moving the needle, 5, 10, 20%, things that I do today at Lowe's. I do have a sense of ownership, but you're always looking to move that needle up, but the movement is a lot smaller at a much larger company like that. So little changes. We can't make those huge feature releases that we're going to do that we would potentially want to, because it's just too disruptive. Whereas a startup, you can. So that just the speed at which you can go to market and the sense of ownership.
Okay. What about you, Clint? What do you really like about being part of a startup?
Yeah, no, I think it's a lot of the same things in terms of having more autonomy over things. But I think also with it being a smaller company, there's like I was kind of alluding to before, there's a lot of kind of opportunities for cross-functional growth and things like that, and working across different teams. And so I might be working with engineering folks on a project one day, I might be working with a different group another day, and so kind of no 2 days are really the same in terms of what you're doing each day, day in, day out. And especially when I first started at Nari, it was closer to 50 people. So maybe by the companies that Sean's talking about, centers, it might be relatively big, but comparing that to what Nari is now, is about 150 people. And kind of the things I was doing back then and what I'm doing now. And there's obviously some consistencies, but there's a lot of different things that change from day to day and from year to year too. So I enjoy that aspect of it, and getting to kind of try out new things and see what I like and what I don't like about the different aspects of a seed business, and try to find kind of my niche and where I best fit in.
Okay. Questions are.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have a couple in the chat and the
Yep. Yeah. So questions are. Let me run this, Sean. Questions are starting to come in. So this one is a good one for you, Clint. Are startups in plant breeding and seed business common, or did you really have to look and hunt to become part of one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a few companies out there, and what you think of is, it depends on what you can consider a startup, like how big a startup is. I think technically in RA we consider ourselves a growth company now, as opposed to what you think of as a traditional startup company. So I would say there's more of those growth type companies out there for sure. Like, I mean, you probably heard of a few of them, Pairwise, Benson Hill. There's others out there too that do plant breeding type activities, or or product development for different crops or things like that. So there's a few of them out there. There's probably not a lot of them out there that are a couple of people, because it takes a decent number of people to get a seed business going. And and things like that. But I mean, I don't know if we'll talk about this later, but I happened to find out about NARI kind of by accident. I had a poster at a conference when I was kind of about to wrap up grad school, and happened to talk with somebody at the conference who worked at NARI, and they just kind of talked to me a little bit about what the company does and some of the types of people they'd be looking for to hire in the future. And I just sent off my CV and happened to pique their interest and got an interview, and kind of went from there. So, I mean, I think a lot of it's just kind of it's sort of by accident. It didn't really come from my network or me exploring it, I guess, the way you might think of a traditional job search being. Because actually, when I joined Inari, they're actually in stealth mode. So, like when you search them, you couldn't really find anything about them. You just kind of had to rely on somewhat what the people you were interviewing with and talking about kind of had to say about the company, and kind of go from there. So, but yeah, no, there's a few companies out there. I mean, there's alternatives to what you think of as the big seed companies for breeding activities, and so yeah, there's a few of us.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'll add to that. Just, I think anytime in any industry, where startups are hard to come by, right? I mean, every company technically starts as a startup, but certain industries, they're overpowered by some of the bigger players. But I think it's a bit more of a challenge to find people. Startups aren't typically finding people, especially if they're in stealth mode. I have a feeling in this industry that a lot of startups are going to kind of go that route. You're going to be leveraging your networks. You're going to be leveraging, professors, people that, your network or your others' networks to kind of find those companies, because they're not just on LinkedIn posting that, they have X, Y, and Z jobs or ZipRecruiter or anything like that. That the typical traditional routes of, I know Clint said he sent his CV out. A lot of times they're not going to have a place where you just go on with an online application. I found on Q, freelancing I was starting to get into freelancing. As soon as I decided to get into freelancing, a company reached out to me, looked at my profile and said, hey, we're building this company. We need one person right now. I was employee number one at the time. Based on that, they didn't have anyone. They weren't, recruiting traditionally. They didn't have recruiters out there trying to find people. They use very different avenues. And that's true of all startups, I think, regardless of the industries, but especially in one where secrecy is probably a big thing, or, you have people leaving a larger company going to start their own thing. They're going to take a few people with them. They're going to reach out to their network to see if there's anyone that they know that they can help out. So yeah, you kind of have to just put yourself out there and make people aware that this is something that of interest, and kind of hope something sticks.
Gotcha. Cool. This is a good one. That's very relevant, I think, for considering startups. How do you guys feel about your job security in general, and the stability of working in a startup? How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, especially in the early stage startups, whether you're going it yourself or you're employee number one, you are stability. I would say security is there if you do your job, right? I mean, stability is really the problem there, because you're still trying to prove yourself. So the company's still trying to gain traction. If you only have a few customers and you're one of those customers for whatever reason is gone, that could be the end of your company. Pandemic comes around and, potentially you can't do anything, that could end your company. So I would definitely say in startups, obviously it goes without saying that security and stability is, a little bit more difficult. But if you have the right team of the right people, the right team, and everyone is pulling their weight in the startup is, giving 110% every single day. I without even realizing, there were weeks I worked 60 to 80 hours a week. I worked remote. Anytime there was a problem on a Saturday or Sunday, I was jumping back on. That sense of ownership gives you, and if the team is built right to do that, I think you have a lot more chances, for success. But anything in a startup, it's still unproven. It's the whole point of a startup. If you get to the growth stage, you have a proven business model. You're just trying to attract more clients. It's a little bit harder to kind of fail. Still not possible, but it's harder. But as a startup, you're still trying to prove that business model. And in that case, security and stability, it's a challenge. But yeah, I think if you have the right team and everyone's, doing what's good for the company, you don't really think about it too much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, when people inherently think about a startup, they think about, just a couple of people at a company that are trying something pretty risky and trying something new that maybe isn't untested or unproven. And I think there are maybe you feel that there's a little bit less job security or stability than, say if you go to a big company or a big corporation or something like that. But I also kind of have the mindset of like when you're at a startup or a growth company, kind of more similar to when ours is at, you're kind of betting on yourself too. You're sort of taking a chance on what your abilities and developing your own abilities. And I feel like, you have a lot more control maybe or over your destiny to a certain extent because you might have the ability to influence, kind of the upper management of your company or, the different aspects of the business and things like that to kind of prove your worth and that kind of thing. Whereas, with a big company, if you look at the seed industry over the past 5 years, and there's been a lot of consolidation and acquisitions and things like that. And, there's probably some really talented people at a big company like a Dow or DuPont. And when they formed to be Corteva, they had to, consolidate people and things like that too. So, there's even at the big companies, you might think of it as being more stable, but I think just with any position, if you work hard and do your job well, I think you should stand out. And I think with a startup company or a growth company, you have that chance to kind of influence it maybe a little bit more closely than you would if you're at a bigger corporation.
Yeah, I'll add. I'll just follow up one last thing. That's the one thing, I wanted to, not that I'm saying we're leaving. The one thing I wanted to say around startups is it's definitely an investment in yourself and then in the company. It's not just a place you go to get a paycheck and some benefits. It's really, you really truly believe in whatever the vision is. You see that, and generally from like a pay standpoint, you're probably going to take a cut. I know early on in my career, I took huge pay cuts for the chance of equity. And even in my last company, I was there for 18 months. I still haven't seen that completely pan out. I have a lot of confidence in the direction they're going, but you may not see the return on that investment for 5, 6, 7 years, if at all. So going into a startup, it definitely isn't a financial investment in the company. You are giving some of your time for that equity, but it's also an investment. I grew so much within a startup with all the different hats I had to wear and the different, just more than just coding, learning the business, learning marketing, financials, learning how to talk to customers, all that. I grew so much with it that I got so much more out of it than just a paycheck and some benefits. In fact, early on at OnQ, I didn't have benefits. So it's definitely not something that's not the motivation to go there.
Yeah, I'm sure it sounds like it would be very satisfying, because so much of you is in that company. So when it's success, you feel a lot of that satisfaction, and two, like you talked about, you're also probably if it takes off because of the equity you have in something like that, the payoff is also probably greater for you. The payoff potential would be greater, I would think. Higher risk, but higher reward potential.
High risk. Yeah, high risk, high reward. And that the other reward, the emotional reward, if I build something at Lowe's and put it out there, and we had a great earnings call a couple of days ago. I don't really feel like I had that much influence. Yeah, collectively you put it all together, we drove towards that. That's great. But when we closed a new customer joined because of a feature that we developed, or you see that feedback in real time, and it's a big feature that took you over the course of 2 months to develop, and then you're seeing the direct correlation of the benefit that is giving the company and driving in more customers. There's a much higher degree of satisfaction and reward from that. But yeah, financially, with the equity, it is certainly a high risk, high reward. You're giving up some salary for that, both internal growth and learning, as well as an investment into the company itself.
Yeah, I guess on the the salary equity kind of front, I guess maybe it's different with a growth type company as opposed to an earlier stage startup. But I found, at least with and already, I mean, the pay was competitive with what I would say is market standard, and you also do have that benefit of the equity too. But it's probably a little bit different with it me coming into a company with 50 people as opposed to just like 3 or 4 people or something. So.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, yeah, would you really recommend to, obviously considering the funding sources for a startup and, kind of diving deeper into that and trying to figure out what do I think the long-term funding potential is for a organization?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to look at, I mean, when I did it, I looked at product market fit. I saw a clear, need. If we were just building software for moving companies, that'd be, one thing. There's a few of them out there. You can kind of get competitive with that, build better features. Where we had a service, a service piece to it, where honestly it didn't matter if we ever stopped building our software, the company could still could thrive off that service model, where we're actually answering the phones, whether it was through our software or another. That's where we're getting all of ours. And I saw a great opportunity to both develop custom software, but also invest it, take it as an opportunity. Anytime I'm looking at joining a startup or, starting my own, it's, what is the viability of this company 5, 6, 7 years from now? I'm basically taking an offer for a salary plus equity. You have to take that into account. It's just like if you were going to invest money into a company, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need $100,000 for 20% of my company, you kind of have to look at it in the same lens as that. It's not just taking a job, but it's also, if I'm going to be potentially giving up something for this, what is the viability of that company? There's different ways of evaluating it. There's tons and tons of models for evaluating a startup. Most of them are never turn out to, they either are way overvalued or way undervalued. Kind of just depends, right? It depends on the execution. So it's not just, it's the business model, it's the team. I encourage people to, look into the founders, look into if they have taken any investment, how much they took, to look into, if you can start to interview that company. You're going to go through probably more interviews, with the startup, you'll be able to talk to a lot more people higher up. You'll get to understand their mindset, what their leadership is like, because ultimately, just a handful of people are going to influence that, the direction of that company at a smaller company than if you have, 50, 100 or 1,000 people. Yeah.
Clint, what would you say? Would you say there's some things like Sean was saying, some things to look for that would be a good sign of this is a startup that really has potential here, or red flags? Are there red flags that you would find that would be like, oh, I should probably stay away from this because I see this going on over here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I probably haven't done as much evaluation of companies as it sounds like what Sean's done, especially if you're moving from, different startups to different startup. But I mean, I think, you got to have something that differentiates yourself from, other people in the marketplace. You want to have something that you think you have to believe in the product or what the company's trying to do. And they have to have a, go-to-market strategy that makes sense and is realistic. And then I think a lot of it is the people, especially when it's a smaller company. So you have to really evaluate the people, like Sean said, the founders, the people who have a lot of influence on how decisions are made or how the company was formed or what it wants to do. So you really have to kind of believe you have to agree with a lot of what the founders and earlier stage people at the company believe in what they want to do as far as the vision of the company. And if you don't agree with that, it's probably not going to be a great fit for you. Not that you can't influence and kind of help set the direction moving forward, but and then also I think, kind of going back to that stability and security aspect of it, like Sean said, looking at where their money's coming from, who it's coming from, how much it is, what series they're on, if they're, past the initial startup part of the company. So, I mean, just kind of seeing those types of things, who's backing them, who, how much they're asking for, all that kind of stuff, and making sure that that lines up with what you think is a realistic amount of money that company's going to need to, kind of with their burn rate to kind of keep things going. So.
Cool. I'm going to go back to the Q&A questions here. We had a couple more. So someone asked, how important is interdisciplinary disciplinary teamwork in your guys' careers? I imagine it's very important, but do you guys want to expand upon that? Working across multiple teams, how important is that, especially in a startup maybe versus a more established
Yeah, I
company?
mean, I think we didn't have teams. Like we would joke we had teams. Our engineering team was 2 people. Our finance was 1. Our sales was 1. Product. We had a product person that was fun. So, but yeah, I mean, to that point, I think in a startup, you can't have your product development being done in isolation without really knowing. Especially in a startup, you need to know what your customers are looking for, right? So there's an iterative process, I think, with any startup where you're getting customer feedback and the product team, developing that product, whether it's, software or, breeding or whatever, that product is going to be influenced, hopefully by real feedback from the customer, right? You start off, you have a hypothesis, but you work as a team to kind of figure out, okay, these are what we want to put into this given product. So yeah, I think, we didn't have a ton of different teams, but you take a lot of different perspectives. Whereas in a much larger established company, I mean, I would even say that's true in kind of any company. We have a product team, but we have business stakeholders that influence, right? And that's the beauty of the agile methodology, which is constantly getting customer feedback and putting that back into the product, is trickling into even the largest companies. So I think interdisciplinary teamwork is important, and it's going to be vital in anyone's career, no matter where you go.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, as they say, right? So no, it's very important, obviously, to be able to work well with others, and yeah, I think especially at a startup, and I think like Sean said, it's not just at startups. Like I think any company you go work for nowadays, you have to be able to work well with others and be cooperative and share responsibilities for things and communicate well on updates and what's going well, what's not going well. For me, working with different aspects of the business, like I kind of alluded to. So it's definitely a very important aspect of being able to be successful at, I think, any company, regardless if it's a startup or not.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and Ben, you asked about red flags with a company, and it's hard to see. If you can get this before you join, it's great, but it's kind of hard to see that. Red flags are companies that don't want to take that feedback, or they say, hey, we're going dark and stealth for the next year, we're building this. That can be very risky. I know sometimes with sometimes you have to do that, but I've heard a lot of horror stories of people working with their boss or manager that basically says that all they did was for the product is build things that one person wanted to add to the product without getting any feedback, without taking any other opinions. We're turned away from anyone else's opinions. When you have one person kind of driving it, it's just a very, very expensive problem that you're going to have someday. So like I said, I don't know if there's a way to do that in in a vetting process. That can be kind of tough until you get inside. But that's one thing to look for is, how willing is the company, what is the feedback loop for the company and the product that they're developing.
Good. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Another question here in the Q&A. I guess, Clint, you can kick this one off. So given that lots of breeders/scientists don't know which companies are startups in the field of agriculture, how can someone interested in startups get the attention of the hiring team of a startup?
Yeah, I think I was saying before, I mean, as far as like startups in stealth mode, that's like, it's kind of harder to track those people down. Probably they're more than likely going to be trying to track you down or track down, people in your network to do that type of thing. I mean, when it's a company like Inari, it's more like growth stage. I mean, we have jobs that are posted on our website, things like that. And it never hurts to, drop a line to somebody on LinkedIn that you might want to find out more about what their responsibilities, their job is at that company. Or a lot of times there's kind of generic ways to leave kind of your information and resume or CV on these company websites as well. So, I mean, sometimes it doesn't hurt to at least to give the cold call with the, dropping the resume or whatever. And I mean, don't be afraid to kind of reach out to people and on LinkedIn or other kind of ways through your network, just to try to find out more about what the company is and what they're looking for and that kind of stuff. And you might be able to get your kind of foot in the door that way too.
Yeah. And Sean, I guess we kind of already hit on that a little bit. I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to add on that.
I have to say network is a big one, especially in my field. There's, startup communities. A lot of, major cities have startup communities going to look at accelerators and incubators, co-working spaces. Again, I don't know if that necessarily all applies here, but at the end of the day, you just kind of have to figure out, think where would you're looking for the founders of these companies mainly. The question here is startup hiring team. The startup hiring team is generally going to be like the founder of that company. There's not, like I said, they don't have a team of recruiters that are going out looking for, or HR going out to find people. You kind of have to know where they may be. You have to be proactive. You may have to go find the person and ping them on LinkedIn or send them a message so finding the companies can be a challenge. But once you do find one of them, you have to be kind of a pit bull about going to get in front of them.
Okay. What would you guys say? So say you guys are hiring somebody for a startup. What would you look for in somebody who's applying? What do you want to see in that person that they would be a good fit for a startup?
From when I did hiring, first and foremost, we evaluated, can you do the job that we're hiring you for? Beyond that, then we just start to kind of get into situational problem solving, making sure that there's somebody that you want to work with. Obviously, you can't really hide people on teams. You're going to be working with this person every single day. They are, they're driving. So working well with that person is a big piece. So just conveying that you are open to, again, startups are that feedback loop. So just not somebody that wants to be told they do X, Y, and Z, and that's all you do, right? Willingness to wear many hats, willing to problem solve, being flexible. I don't think anyone's going to ask you, do you want to work 60, 80 hours, but just know that that's probably going to come with the territory. These are qualities that, sometimes they happen, especially early on. You're trying to build something. So just looking for people that kind of had that mentality of, I'm here again, not for a paycheck and benefits. I'm here to create something new. And it's more of a feeling than really is any kind of particular, quality or trait. And all those kind of feed into, that feeling that I get about somebody. At the end of the day, anytime I'm hiring, I'm looking for somebody, one, I know they can do the job, what we're looking for, but two, that somebody I can work with, somebody that's going to add value. And sometimes that's just a feeling. Sometimes it's not really measurable.
Cool.
Yeah, no, to add on to that, I'd say, the domain expertise is obviously really important, and especially when you're a really small company, like, if you're supposed to be coding or whatever and you don't know how to code, then it's gonna be hard for you to find maybe a position in that particular role. And I think when you're a smaller company, you really have to have that domain expertise for whatever the position is. It's harder to maybe learn that from somebody else at the company, or just because it might be a smaller company, maybe there's nobody else at the company that has that particular expertise. But as far as other general questions I ask, or things I look for, when I go through an interview with somebody looking to join NARI, it's how comfortable are you with ambiguity? How comfortable are you with adapting to and willing to change things? Kind of similar to what Sean was saying. And the instructions for what you have to do isn't always super clear. The goal for what you want to get to eventually is probably clear, but how you get there, there's probably some flexibility and some in room for innovation and how you do that. And I think that's something I think if you want to work at a growth company or a startup company, you have to be kind of comfortable with some ambiguity, comfortable with changing things pretty frequently, whether it be the projects you're working on or the people you're working with or whatever. So.
Great. How about would you guys recommend someone joining a startup as their first job, or kind of an early career choice? Or what are some advantages or disadvantages of this being your first potential first position for somebody coming out of grad school or undergrad or whatever?
I'd say coming straight out as your first job, if you can, again, do the job, prove that, some of that domain expertise. I think it's great to do it earlier the better. I mean, I'm partly at Lowe's because priorities change, work-life balance and a family and all that kind of stuff. Not that you can't do a startup. My previous co-founder just had a child. I mean, she's doing really great at it. So it's not always, you can't do it without a family, but sometimes priorities change, and generally the being able to invest into a startup, you don't have other priorities that are going to conflict with that early on in your career, right? Right out of school. So I think for me, starting my career, it elevated, I grew a lot. I learned a lot. I advanced, kind of climbed the ladder a lot faster. And it was even, able to translate that over. It wasn't like when I joined Lowe's, I had to start back at square one. All that I learned there actually propelled me probably higher up the ladder than if I just started at Lowe's when I was right out of school and just kind of tried to work my way up. So I think there's a ton of benefit there, but it's definitely for a specific type of person. Like I said, if you are somebody that's coming out that's looking for stability and job security, an early stage startup probably isn't the route for you. But if that sense of ownership and building something from the ground up and investing in yourself, all those things that I talked about are intriguing to you, then yeah, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong about coming out of school and jumping right into a startup.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I don't regret coming in already right out of grad school. I mean, I think like you were saying, you grow a lot and you learn a lot just because you're kind of stumbling at first, and you're running into challenges and running into trying to build something. And so I think that part of it's been really good in terms of learning a lot these first couple of years out of school. And not that I wouldn't have learned a lot at a big company or a larger company. I think there's obviously like a lot of different things you can learn at a larger corporation, and it's just sort of what you want to do and what you want to, like you're saying, kind of going back to the stability things. But I mean, it also, I mean, in retrospect, I think it would have been great for me to go work at a larger company for a few years and kind of see what how the big guys do it. And then when you do that, you have an opportunity to learn, oh, these are things I want to change, or these are ways that I could innovate and kind of change the process. Whereas if you're kind of going straight out of school, I mean, you might be able to have those ideas or learn about those things, but you might not, know them as well as if you had gone to like a bigger company right out of school and, kind of saw how traditionally things are done, and then you might have more ideas on how you would improve or change things from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, I don't want to say that a larger company that you can't learn stuff. I mean, there's stuff I learned in the first 6 months when I kind of jumped in the corporate world that I would have loved to have known and taken back to the startup world, right? So there's benefit to both. Inherently, I don't think, it's really up to the person. There's different mindset. It's definitely wild west in a startup. But again, it's a high risk, high reward. You learn different things. You definitely learn process and structure in a larger company. And eventually every startup is trying to achieve that, right? So it's good to have, sometimes if you only know startups, kind of the company grows and outgrows you. I've seen a lot of people, we've had to let a lot of people go just because the company kind of outgrows the person and what they're capable of. The hope is that you can grow with the company, but you see a lot of people, replace their founders with true CEOs. There's a different mentality. A lot of times there's a different mentality. As it grows, things change, right? And it's very, very different worlds.
Right. So yeah, I haven't thought about that too much, but that's interesting. Where it's kind of maybe a different skill set of the growing part versus the managing part once you have a certain level of success. And you might need a different person. There's different personality types. Some of the people who wanted to be part of the growing phase probably leave on their own because they don't want to be part of the managing phase, and they want to go somewhere else and start again somewhere with something else.
Yeah, my previous boss left shortly after I did because he was getting tired of all the management. He was constantly, all he was doing was trying to find people, recruiting. He wasn't building anymore. What he loved about his job early on at the startup, once he started hiring people under him, and even I got into that to a point where he was delegating some things to me and I had to delegate depending on what you're looking for. If you want to just solely do one thing, if you want to build something, and then it becomes more of a managerial task, or you're reporting, looking at numbers or reporting back, and that job is no longer there, then yes, sometimes your job, you get you need to move on and do it again somewhere else. That's what he did.
Cool. Clint, I got another one for you.
Okay.
Do you see an upward trend in startups in the field of breeding and genetics? If yes, what do you think is the reason behind that upward trend?
Like an upward trend, like moving forward, or like
I guess
recently, or
maybe more of them popping up, or
yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, nobody really knows what the future is going to hold exactly, in this business. But I mean, one thing I think that might potentially drive it, or maybe what's already driven some of it to a certain extent already, would, be probably some of the kind of the earliest stuff that was on patent or on PVP for different germplasm is starting to come off patent. So if you look at, some of the earlier inbreds of, like Holden's or, whatever, different companies that existed, 20, 30 years ago that developed pretty good genetics and pretty good germplasm. A lot of that stuff starting to come off patent and off PVP. And so, I mean, that might be something that drives some of that. And then you look at different traits and things like that, it costs a lot of money for a seed company to develop a trait like Roundup Ready or, BT or any of these different, defensive traits for a crop species. And a lot of those are starting to come off patent here in the next few years too, or already have come off patent. So, I mean, I don't know, that's just me speculating in terms of maybe what would drive that more in the future, or why that's starting to happen already. But, because it's genetics that was developed by, good companies, and things that are starting to come off patent that, might be worthwhile looking at or worthwhile using kind of in a product development process.
I think that's a great point. I do think that's probably part of it for sure. Technologies that the barrier to entry, they put in a lot of resources and R&D in the beginning, and now they're coming off patent. So the barrier to entry for startups is maybe lower than it was before, and they can leverage some of these technologies and germplasm that other companies have spent a lot of resources put into, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of different industries, where it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to kind of break into certain industries, kind of whatever you need. I mean, especially around technology, stuff that's heavily technology driven. Used to cost, if you need supercomputing power, it used to cost thousands of dollars. Maybe you even had to buy one. Now you can literally go into the cloud and like rent by the second or transaction or whatever you need, right? So while all of those capabilities are becoming more accessible, that somebody like me can sit here and build something. It takes less manpower. Technology is cheaper, it takes less money, and that it's financial and manpower. As that happens, I think you can have more and more companies break into all kinds of industry.
Yep, those are really good points. There's a lot more data out there too. Just so much data that people can now leverage for to make decisions, rather than having to generate your own data. You can get data from somebody else or something.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go, Sean. I think this is a good one for you. Say you have a concept or idea that you think is a viable product or service. Where do you find help to develop your business model, and how do you source your venture capital?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Kind of both of these questions, maybe if you have a concept or idea, maybe a bit premature. A lot of people think, especially coming out of B school or whatnot, it's like, if I have an idea, I need to develop the entire business model, get it ironed out, get a stamp of approval, and I'm going to get money to do it. Doesn't always, very rarely ever works that way. When you're raising money, it really kind of, depends. There's a lot of different avenues of raising money, but basically, anytime you have a new product or service, keyword there is viable. Minimal viable product is a product or service that others are willing to pay for, right? It's not just, let me build, for instance, let me build a digital product and put it out there, and I have a minimal viable product because I developed it. It's ready to go. People can use it. You actually have to go then and get people to use it, test it out, and get something that is, truly captivating enough that somebody's willing to say, yes, I'm willing to hand over my hard-earned money to you. So From there, yeah, I mean, eventually when you do want to raise money, you're going to have to develop your business model, who are your customers. But it can start with just if you do need to raise money, if you absolutely have nothing, you can't, develop this product without it. The simplest step is to build like a 10-deck slide. Kind of, what is your problem? What is your solution? Who is your customer? How do you plan on, your solution, fixing that problem? Who's your target market? And, start to go to the accelerators, and incubators are great sources. So an incubator is very, if the model is right, if the incubator does, what they truly say they're going to do, their goal is to take your idea and literally incubate it into a product. An accelerator, you kind of graduate to the accelerator model, where the accelerator then takes that minimal viable product and helps you grow it into a business, where then they can spin it off and go on. Those are two great sources. Going at it alone is a bit of a challenge. If you can find other like-minded people that, really believe in the idea, that can help complement you. I don't know if it's very hard to have one single person that can do everything. Just there's not enough hours in the day, even if you have a PhD and an MBA, and you have everything you need. There's just not enough hours in a day. So going alone can be a challenge. But yeah, that's the general approach. There's no perfect recipe. It can take years before you ever get something up off the ground, or you can do it in a matter of a couple months. It kind of just depends. But the goal is really trying to get that minimal viable product, something that people are willing to pay for, and that can take iteration after iteration after iteration to do.
Cool. Clint, was there anything you wanted to add to that, or go to another question?
Yeah, not necessarily. Really. I mean, if you're still at a university, there might be some resources at a university that could help you with, kind of coming up with a way to get your idea on paper and look at funding sources. But yeah, I agree a lot with what Sean was saying about incubators and accelerators, that kind of stuff too.
Cool. Question in the chat for Clint. Clint, you can answer this however you want. Is Inari making hybrid seed or just technology? So are you developing germplasm, I guess, maybe is the question, versus technology?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's some of both. I mean, ultimately Inari is a product development company, and the goal of what we're trying to do is, create new hybrids or new parent seed or new inbreds, or, different varieties for a variety of different crops. But on the flip side, we're also doing some, work in the science front and developing technology, both kind of in the genome editing space and in other avenues as well. So I mean, it's some of both. I mean, obviously the marketable part of the business would be, having a product, seeds that we could, sell. But as a company, we're also developing technology as well.
Cool. Let's see. How about this one? We've touched on this a little bit, but maybe you guys can expand upon it, because I think it's it's an important one for people. Do you think it's more difficult having work-life balance within a startup?
Depends on your significant other and how understanding they are. Some people live to work, right? I mean, I think inherently, if you're looking for 40 hours a week, go home, forget about your job. Startups generally aren't going to be where you find that, at least the early stage startup. You're constantly thinking about it, constantly, whether you can do your job at a computer, you're probably going to be jumping back on there. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, traditional work-life balance. And it also kind of depends on the company. You have some founders that are, we need to get this done. We need to get, and it kind of depends on the company. You have some, the goal is, try to make it fun. So even when you're working 68 hours, a week, there are opportunities, it may not be every day, it may not be every week, but you're really looking for a company to kind of, help with that. Unlimited vacation time, and founders that are truly want you to take that on an as needed basis. I would take a week probably every quarter, and 2 weeks at the end of the year. And they had no problem with that. You earn that. That's a great benefit, and take it if you have it. And then team outings, retreats and all that kind of stuff, they can help out tremendously. But yeah, I think traditional work-life balance, If you ask my wife, then no, I don't think there really is. I don't think I've really experienced a lot of it from the startup, the times I was at startups.
Yeah, no, I think it probably varies by company, and I mean, it might be the case even if you're at a larger company that, if you're a higher up position or something, you might be there, 6 to 8, or working long hours. I think it's sort of up to you to a certain extent. I think at a startup, at least in my experience, if you do the work that you need to get done in a timely manner, like by all means, work 9 to 5. If it's going to take you longer than that's to get what you need to get done, you might need to stay late a few days of the week, or it kind of varies depending, at least for me too, with plant breeding, it's sort of a seasonal thing too. I mean, you might be busier planting or harvest, and as opposed to, in the middle of the winter, there's a lot more flexibility in when you can take time off. And I kind of, to what Sean was saying, I mean, the company I work for in RE, we do technically have unlimited PTO, so there's really no formal, we would request time off and that type of thing, but in reality, we could take as much time off as we wanted within reason, obviously. So it's encouraged for us at least to get out and spend time with family or friends, and not always necessarily be at the office from 6 to 8 every day or something. So
Cool. How about this? What's a key skill or some skills you would tell somebody who's thinking about joining a startup to have, as maybe right now they're an undergrad or a graduate student? What either skills should they try and develop that would make them more prepared for a startup, or experiences they should have? Maybe it's internships or whatever. Do you have some advice for what somebody can work on to make them more prepared for a startup in their educational world they're in now?
I mean, for me, it's flexibility and being able to adapt to changing requirements, or changing and wearing multiple hats. How to actually go about that. It's sometimes it's learned on the job. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't really think of join organizations, be a part of groups like this, participate, get comfortable. Talking in front of other people, that's a big one. You can't just be hide away in a hole somewhere. And for me, like code, right, I had to be out in front of people. I had to talk to customers. You wear a lot of different hats, so it may be expected of you to take on some of those roles. So just comfort, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable would be the main thing.
yeah, I don't know if I'm similar to Sean. I don't necessarily have a specific skill I can think of that really sets you apart per se. I mean, like you were saying, just continue to try different experiences and kind of learn from those. But I think Ben, you already mentioned this, see if these companies are offering internships. I know Anari offers internships, and a lot of other growth type companies, or even maybe some startups will offer some internships sometimes to give you kind of a flavor of what's going on there. And then a lot of times too, if you do a good job with your internship and you guys kind of gel well with the company and things like that, then a lot of times that could turn into something down the road. I know that worked out well for you, Ben, per se too. So
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, we got 2 minutes left. I'm going to ask you guys each a fun one, and then I'm going to give you guys a minute to give your last remarks. Anything else you wanted to say? So, Clint, I'm going to give you a fun one here. How about this? I know you like this one. If you could describe yourself as a flavor of ice cream, what would it be?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Ben. That's a great question, and one that requires a lot of thought and consideration. But no, this is sort of a joke between Ben and I. But yeah, a long time ago, there was an interview I did that they were trying to keep me on my toes and see what you kind of see how you'd respond to. Just this really spontaneous question, and that question was asked, and I think I said vanilla, because it's kind of plain, but most people like it, and gets along with most things. So that was the way I answered the question. I guess I'd probably still answer it the same way. So
It's a good answer. It's a really good answer. Hey, all right, Sean, I got one for you too. Which one of us is better at basketball?
We're talking today.
Let's say in our prime, who do you think was a better player?
Oh man, honestly probably you. I'll give you that one.
That's the right answer. You got it right.
That's why I figured. Yeah, I figured I would.
That surprises me. I've seen Ben shoot some basketballs before.
This is my trajectory on my basketball skills. Cool. All right. So do you guys, any last words you want to give to the people here? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer. I think, if it's, some of the stuff that I've talked about, joining a startup, I don't think there's really the wrong time to get involved in a startup. I personally miss it and will love to jump back in one day. That, drive to want to build something from the ground up, and kind of, grow it. It's a feeling from a day to day that it really, makes me, it made me love going to work every day. And even at Lowe's, I get that. I actually, even though it's a larger company, the product I'm actually working on is kind of in a startup model. We're building it from the ground up. So I still get that sense. It's not like I've abandoned that and hate what I do. So I always have that drive. And if there's even an ounce of that in you, I encourage anyone to kind of explore that. You could always try it, for 6 months. There's no harm in, checking out a company, for whatever reason. It may not be the right thing for you, may not be the right people, may not be the right product. There's no harm in checking it out. I've moved around from, a handful of companies in my 8-year career. There's nothing that says you have to go, necessarily settle down, in one company and work it for 30 years. Always try new things, and especially in a startup, it's definitely new, and it's a different experience. But I encourage anyone that if any of what I said kind of resonates with them, to definitely explore it.
Great, Clint.
Yeah, no, I mean, all great things that Sean just said. I mean, just give it a shot. I mean, like you're saying, I mean, it's not necessarily something that you have to do for the rest of your life. If you give it a shot, and you don't like it after 6 months or a year or whatever, is go try something else and see what else you like. And so I think just give it a shot and try out different things, and hopefully you'll find your path. And I guess just as a short plug for Inari, and kind of since it's a breeding audience, we do have a couple of plant breeding positions that are open right now. So feel free to check those out on our website, and look me up on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever if you have questions or anything about that. So, but no, thanks Ben for the opportunity, and good to talk with you too, Sean. So.
All right, thanks. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Sean. I think this was great. I think it probably helped a lot of people learn more about startups and give them some things to think about. Thank you everybody who was attending. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it. And enjoy your holiday weekend, and stay safe. So, cool. All right, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks.